So, anyway, have any of your students like even mentioned? I mean, you're doing more, more like in the news now stories with your students. Are they even talking about it, or is it even?
Oh, I
something?
can sense that if I held the discussions, that there's a lot of that undercurrent going on. You know, we've talked about it a little bit, but if we had full-out discussions, yeah, that sentiment's certainly there.
Yeah.
The reason why I haven't really gone that in-depth about them is to keep that
Yeah,
down.
yeah, no, and I have
But,
too. Yeah, I have too,
um,
especially with this one student in particular, because I don't want it to become, you know, I don't want it to backfire. You know what I mean?
Well, you don't want it to become
Yeah.
religious nor political.
Right,
because then,
exactly.
Then you start talking about home beliefs and.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if this might help. I don't know.
My kids are quick to talk about who's running for president,
Yes.
but nobody's talking about Syrian refugees or anything like that. So I thought that was interesting because in the past I've had, you know, I could hear it sort of running, you know.
We did that news story a while back with, right after the Paris attacks, and we were talking about, I can't remember what we were talking about. What I was using it as a news story. We were looking at legal rights. We were, I don't know, profiling or something came up in there.
Mm-hmm.
There were different stories. I know what it was. I just pulled things from the front headlines, and that was it. And we were looking at, that was the day that Abbott said, hey,
Yeah.
refugees aren't coming here, and all those kinds of things. We were looking at those. And I got a sense of it then,
Yeah.
that it's there. But, I mean, good grief, the Philadelphia Daily News has Donald Trump with his hand up like this.
Yes.
And it says the new Fuhrer. And,
Yeah, yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff where you can look at, you know,
It's kind of like
modern-day
I wish the Holocaust unit was like
interpretations.
right now. So you
Well,
could,
I
like,
was going to say, there was
you can pull
somebody
that
that I heard
stuff.
speaking the other day on it and was making all of those comparisons.
Mhm.
And of course, that's, when you're looking at it, one of the reasons why you study it in the first place.
Right.
But if you're going to bring those topics up, you've got to be prepared to
Right.
keep it under control and realize that a lot of these kids parrot what their parents
Yeah.
think. And
So, okay, so, well, what do you guys think about that then? Because I think that's a good point. I mean, there's 2 points that I see as being an issue for this, like a problem. One is the amount of literature that is available that they can use. I mean, we'd have to do some research into, I mean, I know there are some good books out there available on things like Rwanda, Bosnia.
The Lost Boys of the Sudan.
Yeah, yeah. Are there, I mean, and I know there's tons of literature available for Native American, you know,
Japanese American internment camp.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
another. The kids were
yeah,
shocked
I
by
was
that last
interested in
year.
that,
Yeah.
that half of them, even my like students of Asian descent, you know, I had a bunch that did know about it. It was mainly pre-AP and had heard about it, but I was very surprised, you know.
And there was an internment camp not far from here. It was in, was it Waco?
Well, there's a German POW camp that was over that way.
I was gonna say, isn't it one of those German towns?
Down toward Austin, you mean?
Yeah, there's like a whole
Yeah.
bunch of
Yeah.
communities that are
Because
really
that whole like New Braunfels
Yeah.
area is very
Um,
Fredericksburg, all that.
so I'm wondering, like, I mean, I see that as being that could be overcome a lot easier than do we open this up for on-level students that the sensitivity may not be there, and we may have to. I mean, we would really have to heavy-handed
Well,
rein it in, or do we, you know, do we just,
the catch is you're not going to find a lot of books.
yeah.
Well, there will be some new books out there, memoirs, but you're not going to find a lot of books about that current topic. You're going to find
Right.
news articles and things
Right.
about
Yeah.
that topic.
And that's not what we're going for, because it needs to be a, you know, it would need to be.
A longer piece.
But that is part of a unit, though, you could bring in through those current article studies before the book
Right.
circle piece.
Yeah,
But that's, I mean, even though it's a touchy situation, I think you've got to bring it up because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
I mean, because all these kids, when they talk about the Holocaust, they go, well, gee, if I were alive, I would have
Right,
helped out
yeah.
or whatever, and,
Yeah.
okay, so now you are alive, and here are these Syrian refugees, and what's your opinion?
So one of the other things that I was kind of thinking, and Carrie was thinking about it too, was this idea of, can we do something that maybe is, because last year what I did was a supplemental, they did it all on their own at home. We did it flipped. And they did, they picked one element of the Holocaust that was either shocking to, well, shocking, but that they wanted to learn more about. They went out, it was like, it talked about it a little bit of a scavenger hunt. They go out and find stuff online on their own, and then they created kind of their own personal, I had posters and PowerPoints and things like that. I had some girls do like drawings and canvases. I still have a canvas up there. I have a girl that did a painting. Do we, instead of opening up like book options, do something like that they can research as a flipped lesson outside of class, which is not taking away from our time? Open it up as a kind of a flipped lesson. They'd make a comparison using more current articles, nonfiction or fiction, depending on if they want to do it, and do some kind of a project where they're presenting that information to others through something visual or something, something a little more creative.
So I've been thinking about this topic too, knowing this is coming, not this week, but this is coming up this next
Right.
semester, and seeing all these associations. But if you're truly going to have a discussion and open it up, it's got to be open up to opposing view. And when you get to a topic this hot,
Yeah.
you're going to have other people that have a valid opinion that's going to tick people off.
Yeah.
And you're going to have the student who's not Muslim sitting right next to the other one going, they scare me to death. And
Yeah, and are the 8th grade students equipped to handle that
Yeah,
maturity
you
wise?
know. I don't know, that's a really
Yeah.
tough decision, but on the other hand, if you open it up and talk about it, it would be hard, I mean, you can't just jump in and say, well, we're only saying what, some people agree with and some, I don't know, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
I think it's extremely relevant, I think it's extremely dead on with what needs to be talked about, but at the same time,
Could you keep it just to expose them, but keep it in the same kind of framework? Like, the EA1 is presenting the voices of the Holocaust, but they do that with another perspective, like you were talking
Yeah.
about, and present it. And so you can expose them to the other topics, and then they can go find an editorial or something like that and make that comparison, but they keep it within this same structure.
see, I thought about presenting
Yeah.
kind of both sides of some things, but having it as opposed to being this big oral discussion, that it's more of a, here's the thing, and it's a written response kind of thing.
That way you can keep
That
the
way they
lid
can
on
say
the
what
pot.
they want.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if I would want to make it an oral discussion, so to speak.
So rather than actually talking about it, they're
Yeah,
writing
let me give you an
about
example.
it.
So if
and
I'm
we're-
talking about, for example, the United States, I mean, the old saying, keep Europe out of America, or America out of Europe, Europe out of America, and we're not letting refugees in. Because I use that all the time when we're doing it, talking about, look, all these people, when you're trying to immigrate, like that passport, you're trying to immigrate, none of these people want you.
Yeah.
And here's the reasons why. And they really didn't have the concept of refugee stuff, but of course now they would. Okay, well now the situation's there. You're criticizing these people for not letting more people in. Now in today's situation, are you willing to take these other people in? Why or why not? And kind of
Right.
put it, and then put it right back that this isn't some sort of history. I mean, this is real life, and it's easy to criticize what these people did. Now,
Looking back.
here's the thing. Somebody's trying to track them down. Are you going to hide them in your house knowing all this stuff could happen to you? Now it's not such an easy call of, oh, I would have hit them all war long.
Yeah, I can't say
You
that
know.
comment.
Uh,
Sure.
But I think that it would need to be, here's the situation, like a tennis match thing almost. Here's what went on, now here's the connection I see, and then, here's some background news, or whatever that gives both sides. Now you tell me on paper what you would do.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it as a Socratic seminar?
Well, I could get away with, I could do it in humanities, but when you're doing it overall, especially if I'm doing it with on level, there's no way in the world I'd do it.
Well, you know,
And
So that's what I'm thinking. Last year it was a no-brainer. I did it no problem with my pre-AP. This year I'm a little more hesitant. On level, no. You're absolutely right.
well, see, I'm sensing that these kids would turn on them in a second.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my vibe or feel for it.
Yeah.
And I think even you mentioned some kids saying things. I think even some of them all the time kind of joke around with some of those terms or whatever. But now, so I don't know.
I think
Can you-
it'd definitely be an issue. I think you have those kids that would not be afraid to speak their mind, no matter how
What if you,
bad the feelings would get hurt.
what if you did it almost like through Canvas for the presenting and
Almost
stuff,
like
and they
that.
can respond, like they make a video themselves as if they would have, they post it, that's part of their, and then as far as the response part, each person has to choose one video to watch of another peer's and then respond to that topic, and it's anonymous. You know what I mean? They're responding in a written format to you, not to the whole group. So
Yeah.
they're still doing their presentation and they're researching all of their stuff. The other students are still doing, but they're getting that, you wanted that exposure
Yeah.
and that sensitivity. They still get to look at another topic or another viewpoint and respond to it in a more controlled
Right.
manner.
Yeah.
What do y'all? I'm just trying to-
No, I could see that. I'm just trying to think, the only reason I was going, because I'm trying to think, okay, I need Shonda to come in and help me with Canvas to do something like that. But
It's
I could
really
see-
easy for them to upload videos.
Yeah.
Really easy.
Yeah, because they could do that.
And then they could just go in and they have to pick one that they want to respond to, but they respond to it privately,
Yeah.
like in a Google Doc to you.
And
Not
that's
to
not
their
even
peer.
to the peer.
Right.
That might be good. I like the idea too, though, of like what Scott was saying. This idea of they're responding written.
We can even do that through Canvas.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm definitely liking Canvas because it makes that grading piece a whole lot easier, and it's a lot faster too.
Well, mine are used to it. I present hypotheticals like this to them all the time. And that's the way that I do it when it's, like the refugee thing, and I put the picture of that dead kid up there and said,
Yeah.
okay, now here's the thing, and we talk questions about it. Now this puts a new spin on it. Does this change your mind to how you feel, et cetera? And they're all doing it written.
Because what's
Yeah.
really your goals? Your goals are to have the students research and understand the Holocaust, and then something that relates to it that's more modern and current, and their response to that.
Or even just another episode of it that they could see, draw those
Right.
connections, and
The goal's not really to have the big conversation within the class.
No, not really. No, not especially not with the Holocaust unit. I mean, ultimately, I would love it to be able to go to the Holocaust Museum and not have to get on to a group of kids because they were being so ridiculously insensitive that it offended, a community member. That would be lovely. But, I mean, whether or not we can teach them sensitivity, I don't really think that that's going to be possible, in a 4 or 9 week period. You know what I mean?
They're middle
So
school.
I know. But
Yeah,
I
their
was
concept of the
really
world is this large.
yeah. I was really surprised though last year that the ones that I thought would be the most insensitive about the topic were the most quiet, taking stuff in. It did surprise me because since it was the first time I had taught that unit, I was very surprised, and I'm hoping that we'll have that same.
But you were initially looking like literature circle type things.
I was, but the more that I think about it, I mean, if we're gonna do it something like the lit circles, I mean, I still think that that's a viable option to allow them to read something that is not another Holocaust novel. They can read a novel, about the Trail of Tears instead, and then when we do the lit circles, they are presenting that, and so that's another element for other kids to be able to learn about and to have another book that is potential read for them.
You might want to call, if you want to find other titles, call the Barnes & Noble rep. I'll send you her name. She's awesome that we work with. And just
Okay.
ask her if she knows of any good books that are appropriate for this age
Age
level.
group, that's gonna be
This
the,
age group
Yeah.
dealing with that topic.
Yeah.
So I'll send you her
will
name.
you send me her
Mhm.
name? Okay, that would be awesome.
Kelly
So,
Gallagher does that kind of stuff on Twitter. He'll
Yeah.
send out and ask for what are the top nonfiction books on such and such a topic, and
Donald Miller has those, like lists, I mean, just lists and pages of, you know, lists for different age groups and things like that, so that might be something to look at too. So, I guess that,
but that, just for clarity's sake, we are talking pre-AP and
I think we're talking pre-AP. I think for on level, excuse me, we stick with, I mean, don't you guys agree?
I think so. I think you can have at the most one partial class discussion with them about a topic. I don't think you'd be able to draw something out and sustain it. And I just don't simply think that they have that background to build that conversation.
They don't have the appropriate schema.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I agree. I agree. So one of the things that Susan has been asking for us to do and to think about, I know that at the last faculty meeting we talked about this whole writing, everybody writing, all subjects writing. And so the last question I sent to you guys on the agenda was, how can we incorporate other departments into this project or into something similar to this? History, it's kind of a no-brainer because they're already doing the Trail of Tears. Carrie said that she's interested in having some of them draw those connections, writing, doing critical writing over comparisons between, what they're learning in English and what they're learning in history, and analyzing that way. But I'm kind of curious, does anybody see how any other subjects could work? I mean, because I'm thinking,
It depends on what they're studying at that time of
Yeah.
year. If they could.
well, the disappearing spoon
yeah,
that pre-AP,
Science.
was doing in science. There's a lot. There's a whole section. And first of all, there's a whole bunch of things that talk about consequences of Germany, Germany's superpower status, and how out of that came a lot of scientists and a lot of
Yeah.
discoveries around the periodic table and elements and stuff like that. So that's an interesting piece to kind of fold into the mix. But there's also a section in there where they talk about how when elements are found in certain parts of the world in these sort of obscure places, and how we go in after them, or we send the natives in after whatever the element is, and it completely changes the dynamic, and how wars and things, sort of come out of that. And then it becomes how do we balance the needs of the people who want this item that requires that element to the people who live in that area, and how do you manage that? It's kind of like what happened with elephants, and going after their tusks and the rhino horns and all of that, and it just decimates an entire population of animals. And it's the same sort of thing happening because we need a certain element for a piece in our cell phone that is the hot new item on the market, and it eventually starts a civil war somewhere. Like,
yeah.
Who's responsible for that? How do we deal with that? And how can we be sensitive to that? So there is a tie-in there, how they in the science department fold that in. That remains to be seen. That would be worth a conversation to have with those teachers.
With the teachers.
Like, I know that they were their last quiz on that was last week. I don't know what kind of quiz. I mean, I know their quizzes were on Canvas. I know that they were short answer questions.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm curious to. I guess I could talk to Jeff and find out. Because I'm curious to see like what kind of writing they got out of that.
Well, I know that,
with
like I
their
said, they had
answer.
short answer questions, and that it was I know that it was a struggle to get them graded because some of the answers were just sort of all over the place, and they didn't.
Go figure.
Get right to the
Oh,
point.
goodness.
And
Yeah.
you get those partially thought out answers,
Can't
or
believe that. My students write so well.
yeah, they do.
They're so awesome. Today, one of my students, I'm sorry, this is so off topic, but one of my students asked, how do we even start this paper? And I go, for right now, just start with your thesis. Jump from your thesis into the body. We will come back to the introduction later and make it nicer if you want to. If not, thesis, and then start proving it, because that's what I need from you. Oh, okay. I just, yeah. So I guess that might be the one reason why I'm kind of scared to like, oh, let's have them write about it and analyze it through writing. Because to be honest, this year has been pulling teeth. It's been a lot more difficult to get through some of this.
This year?
I don't know. Okay, and I think that honestly, I think I figured out why last year wasn't so bad, because probably about 40% of my students were returners that I had been working with since 7th grade. So they were kind of writing how I wanted them to write already. So I was good with those. I don't know. It's just been a struggle. So, but yeah, I agree that the idea of opening up some of those discussions could be dangerous. Unless
Well,
we're just sticking mainly with Native Americans.
The way I thought
And then
about
we'll
it,
get-
I mean, if you're gonna truly have a discussion, and it's a dialogue, not a monologue, you've gotta let them have their opinion, and the
Yeah.
opinions they're gonna have are gonna offend people, and without the right to offend, you can't express, but it's
Yeah.
a hot topic, and, just because it offends kid A sitting over here, it doesn't mean kid B has to,
Right. Well, and I agree with that, and I think that some of our pre-APs are ready for that. They're okay. It wouldn't be as dangerous. However, I
think before, if you guys decide that they are gonna have conversation in class with each other, before you do that, that you make the parents aware.
yeah, especially after this year. I mean, we've got some serious helicopters.
And make sure that administration knows what you're doing, so everybody's on the
Yes,
same
yeah, that's kind of
page.
why I wish Sarah had been able to be here today. Because, yeah, I agree. That way, that's why the idea of they're responding just to me on Canvas is good, or like,
Yeah, they're still able to share their
writing,
opinion, it's just
yeah.
not,
yeah,
Well, one way that I usually do it is I go back to current news stories and hear the factual related things, and then at the end, here's something, what would you do differently, et cetera.
yeah,
Like, for example, there was one that the question when they were doing the parent thing, if these acts are being perpetrated by certain types of individuals, and there was a quote that some official had, and says, that quote makes it seem like they knew exactly who they're looking for in the first place. Then in a sense, to do this, would you now go in, does that mean these people's rights are fair game and let's go into their houses, et cetera,
Yeah.
and the sake for protection for us all, go in there? And, I don't remember exactly what the question was or how it was worded, but there's this hypothetical, okay, what would you do in this situation?
yeah. And that might be good, that
And I even posed it, okay, so this stuff's being done nationwide and everyone that's doing it's Texan.
Yeah.
And therefore, we decided, you know what, people in Texas, you should know it because since all these things are being done by Texans, you should accept the fact that we're gonna come in and search your stuff more than we would other people because after all, we're just, we're just using common sense. It's Texans that are doing all this, so let's really go
yeah.
in and, we can just go into Texans' home without a warrant.
I think so.
And,
Come get my gun.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll switch up the
Yeah.
terminology, and you know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
But when you use different terms,
All of a
then
sudden
you
the
can
kids
kind of
are
have
like,
a conversation.
yeah.
But there is going to be some kid that goes, "I'm beginning to not like all Texans, period." And then you got to deal with
Yeah.
that stuff,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, sometimes I think it might be easier to teach high school students. Can have I don't know if you can you have those conversations a little easier, I guess. maybe, so,
A little bit.
a little bit.
I think
But,
I think in high school you're going to get more educated responses, people that actually have a little bit of
There's a little more
Less.
depth.
So
Yeah, well,
so
unless just
their
mom and
opinion may
dad,
be
what coming out of
crazy,
their mouth, yeah.
and it may not be agreeable, but at least there's some logic behind it, and a logical, crazy argument
Yeah.
sometimes is easier to stomach.
And they'll usually have something more than just because.
Yeah.
Why do you believe that? Because.
Cause mom and dad told me. And that, because is always mom and dad, that's what they're talking
Oh, yeah.
about at home. And so that's what comes out of their
Well,
mouth.
honestly, at 8th grade, would you really expect? I mean,
No,
their
not
exposure
really.
to the outside world is just beginning. Really.
Yeah.
As funny as
I
I've already
know.
started with my kids though, like whatever you believe, you need to make it your belief and not your parents'
Yeah.
belief. Like, understand, we've dealt with some topics. I have kids that are just asking topics, and we'll talk about it. But understand,
Yeah.
I don't care what you believe, but you need to understand why you believe what you believe.
Yeah.
Not because your parents believe it. Know why you believe it, and it can be. But you can believe exactly what your parents believe, and that's fine. But know why.
Yeah,
It's important.
There's a lot of parents that don't have that philosophy. They
Yeah.
want their kids to believe what they believe.
And I
Because-
think that's the hardest part is that I think we have a lot of those this year, you know. But Brandon, I agree with, I was going to say that we were talking about that with the media, back with the media and this persuasion that we're doing right now. That's one of the interesting things is they may have an opinion on a topic, but they have no support whatsoever to back that up. So that's what we're struggling with right now. All right.
So what's your next step on
Yeah, so our next step on this, I'll kind of try to type up some notes and stuff from today to kind of clarify a little bit. And then we can decide, I mean, obviously, we're not even going to get into this until after the holidays. So we can kind of decide, do we want to tackle it? Do we want to, you know, how do we want to do it? I mean, because it was just a conversation I wanted to open up and see what we want to do. If we do decide to tackle it, I can talk with Carrie. We can make that connection between history and English, and we can talk about the specifics of it. It sounds like maybe we'll do more like responses to.
I just had an idea of another way you could do it if you really wanted to do something along those lines, is almost an article of the week kind of a thing where you do it over a series of weeks and you've presented different,
Different
each week has a different
examples.
phase of it.
Yeah.
And you could do something contemporary, then you could go back in history and you could talk about making connections, then you could go back and you could do it over a series. And it could be some sort of written response to you where there's still.
That's what, yeah, and that might be something good, and then they could even do some
Save
kind
the
of a
fighting and the
project.
feelings
You
getting.
know,
Yeah.
They could even bring stuff like that up there in their literature circles
Yeah.
if they make a connection.
Well, I
some
thought it
way.
was interesting that a lot of them had absolutely no concept of the fact that, you know, the Holocaust wasn't the first time that Jews had been targeted. And like, they had no concept of that. So like you said, do contemporary, then a little bit further back, then a little further back, and keep going back so that they can see that this is a repetitive,
We're
I'll
jumping
tell
back
them
and
that,
forth.
you know,
Yeah.
we do the, you know, I do the Merchant of Venice.
yes.
And I tell them, you know,
Yeah.
the ironic thing is that people living in Shakespeare's audience never would have seen a, you know, in
No,
England,
not a
never would have
problem.
seen a Jew face to face. They were forbidden to live there. And they would have recognized who Shylock was supposed to be, a Jew, 'cause he had a big red clown nose. And we talk, and that's 1500s.
Well, and they wouldn't have had a problem at all with the idea of a pound of flesh and
Well,
a-
see, we talk at the end,
Yeah.
and there's a whole thing of, is it comedy, is it a tragedy, et cetera, and how we view it over days.
Yeah.
Can you really force somebody to be a different religion?
Yeah. Yeah, that, I think that, I like that.
But that makes it hit home for them, and I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, this is way back, and this, you know, it goes further back.
Yeah.
But these prejudices, et cetera, didn't just pop up. They're just hitting on what's currently in the undercurrent. And you could even make a connection and talk about, okay, all these kinds of things that are being said by certain political candidates, et cetera, they're tying into undercurrents of things that are already there.
yeah,
And those things, you know, you could talk about how they're learned or passed down or whatever, and talk about, hey, look, this isn't 1930s Germany we're talking about, it's,
it's, yeah,
you know, on and on and on and on and on.
just yesterday. I was like, with the president.
But you can
Yeah.
show, that literally there's that I think it's Philadelphia Daily News maybe, It has a picture of him, and just happens to have his hand
just
up
happens
in
to
a
have his
speech, but
hand
they've got a
up.
camera angle just right.
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen the picture, but I mean, they were talking about it on the news this morning.
And there's
This-
another one that says the new Fuhrer, and it has his picture on it.
Well, and I love how this morning on the news they were talking about Trump, and then they were all of a sudden all these other Republicans are coming in. Oh no, we're just talking about, you know, it's like they have to backtrack because he didn't use the right terms apparently. So, okay, well, thank you guys. And what we'll do is like probably in our planning day in January decide what we want to do and if we want to do this.
And I just emailed our secretary to get the Barnes and Noble writ, so.
Thank you.
And there's no telling what'll happen between now and then anyway.
No
Exactly.
kidding, frighteningly so,
And that's some good
Scott.
stuff to add to it.